Hello, everyone. And today we wanted to talk to you about communication. Communication between people is a very challenging thing, especially in organizations that are multicultural, meaning that people come from different countries. I'm not just talking about the challenge where people are not English native speakers. I'm talking also on people that comes from different culture. I used to run offices in multiple locations around the world. Two of them were Canada and England. And even between those two countries where people were actually English native speaker, we do have communication challenges. When we are saying communication challenge, we need to understand we are all using English as a language. But the tricky thing about language is that every word is a mental concept, meaning that every person holds specific interpretation that it not necessarily always contains just the verbal explanation of what the word is actually saying. Every word has a charge, and I can have multiple explanation between me not being a native English speaker and not necessarily even understanding how culturally it's supposed to open an email or open a conversation. I didn't came with any bad intention, and somebody on the other side, because I didn't do that, even though my English is great, could be offended. So language communication based on language, written or spoken, is very challenging. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Lena, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, the way we communicate with each other is very important. And especially when it comes, to workplaces and creating this harmony, I guess, between people in team dynamics. And the breakdown can happen so easily, right? From avoiding difficult conversations with our managers and coworkers, maybe like you already touched on it, like misunderstanding because of different conversation styles. Maybe like somebody writes an email and you don't really clear on what they say. And instead of actually asking them to clarify that, you pretend that you understand what is required because you're just afraid to kind of look inappropriate, or you think maybe you should know better. So, and another way actually is another example I just want to give quickly, is that some people really can't even break into conversation. So if you've got like somebody who's more assertive with a like powerful voice, they know what they're talking about, and all people like that who've got the strong opinions and they can just go for it and just say what they feel. And then you've got somebody maybe like more introverted, more inwards, and they wouldn't know how to approach this conversation. So yeah, and I believe we really need to find a way on how to find a way for everybody to express what they feel, what they think, and create an environment where people feel safe to do so.
So Lena provided a lot of good challenges that organizations are dealing with on a daily basis. Even in our relationship, language and communication is very tricky. And what I want to do today is try to first get something, an idea. If you resonate with that, every example that Lena provides and you can think about is going to be addressed differently. And what we need to understand is, first, we need to understand what language is. Language is not all about the word and the meaning. Meaning is more than what the word stands for, because language and words come with an emotional attachment to us, to what it means per our culture, our perspective, how we experienced it in life. When we're saying a word, usually it comes with an emotional baggage that not necessarily the person we are talking to understand completely what it means to you. Okay, so think about it this way. I spoke about things like culture and so on, and that is widely understood. In different cultures, things need to understand differently, but also the way we are building a sentence, what word we are choosing. In my vocabulary, there isn't a lot of words I can choose from. And a native English speaker, in English, there is a lot of nuances that if you are changing one word, the whole meaning of the sentence change. And could be that I chose, even by semantic, not the appropriate word that in a sentence will convey a different message. And the minute we understand that language and communication is magic and not necessarily like a math formula the minute I said something, the output is a complete, truth, like 1 + 1 + 2, when we are open to that, all the way we approach conversation and everything we spoke about, cultures, emails, and so on, we immediately will take a step back, and it will be a space, making sure that first we understood completely what was the message that was forward. In my organization, that was like the basis when we wrote something or made a conversation from any specific type or for any reasons. We made sure that we asked either for feedback, meaning keeping an open loop to understand what the person took from that conversation, or what did you understand. Just I made the notion to the organization, the understanding that language comes with personal interpretation. And if we want to avoid, any kind of misunderstanding, it will still happen, but we would still understand that we need to make sure we convey the message. If we convey the message and there is differences, great, let's talk about them. But first, let's understand that what we wanted to say actually was forwarded to the other side.
Yeah, and I think, you've mentioned a great point. It's important to ask for clarification. If there is even a single doubt about what's being asked of you or whatever it is, it's really, we need to get out of our heads, because it's only our limiting beliefs that make us think that we're not adequate, or we should know better, or whatever that is, or other people are going to think we're stupid. I mean, the reason I'm really saying this, because that's what this syndrome, or I don't know, it's not imposter syndrome, but whatever it's called, I've had for so many years. I was scared to ask people to elaborate and to explain to me what they mean. So if they send me an email, I would rather make an assumption or about what they meant, or I will maybe ask like a colleague who I had a really good relationship to help me to translate, instead of going back to the person and say, hey, can you please clarify the point? And I didn't do that because it just made me feel inadequate. And that's a limiting belief that we need to take responsibility for and work through. So asking for that clarification, for feedback, is extremely important, because it can be a complete deal breaker, right? I mean, few times when I was a computer programmer, I would go and write a piece of code and it actually didn't do what it needed to do, just simply because I didn't ask for clarification.
I also want to introduce two terms. I'm sure you all know what IQ is. So next to IQ, there is EQ. EQ is an emotional, it's an emotional understanding. When we are communicating, communication is not just verbal. When somebody's saying something, there is a lot of factors around it, like tone of voice, like what it was his body language. And sometimes also the message can be conveyed in other words. EQ actually helps us. If we are more emotionally evolved, that we are picking up on a lot of innuendos, a lot of other factors when we are communicating, we are more mature, most likely we will be able to get more out of the conversation, even without word. But we cannot expect that everybody is like that. And again, because communication is combined from a lot of factors, not just the mental concept we have around words, it's also the tone of voice, how we speak. Do we let somebody else speak? For example, I come from the Middle East. A lot of the feedback that's been forwarded to me by my American colleagues, by my United Kingdom colleagues, was that we have no manners when we are not waiting for somebody to stop and so on. And I was never aware, and it was never done by any harm or disrespect to anybody. It's just the way I brought up. And because I'm excited, because I'm really excited about the topic, and he said something and I had to finish his sentence. So that is EQ, understanding that also there is an emotional connection to language, and it's because it's a voice, we are conveying a lot of things. So this is another thing that we have to work on ourselves, our emotional development, and understand that not necessarily the person that is standing next to you in IQ, it's already ingrained in everybody, understanding that not all of us are smart or under all areas. So now what I'm asking you, Google it, it's EQ. And most of the people that are very famous, for example, Einstein had both of them, EQ and IQ. This is why he was able to incorporate very, very complicated information that not a lot of people can, because it was higher in both. So just understand we are not the same. Not everybody gets everything emotional around the conversation. So take that also as a factor in communication.
And we also, I mean, the previous video we did on productivity, how different we stay productive, right? What productivity looks to one person may be very different to another. And in the same way, we are all energetically wired to communicate differently. And what was really interesting for me to learn, one of the human design energy types, and if you don't know what human design, you can watch previous video on productivity, or there is also a video on human design I've recorded. But one of the types called generators, actually generators and manifesting generators. So they actually communicate best to yes or no questions. And I know from personal experience that if I'm given an open-ended question versus a yes or no, I will respond a lot easier. I don't even have to think about it to respond to yes or no question. While, for example, you speak to a different person who is not a generator, maybe like a manifester, for them, open-ended question is better. So when it comes, like, for example, for interviewing people, or even having conversation, discussions with them, trying to get some information, because not all people can reveal information easily, not because they don't want to, they just can't even articulate it. Just understanding that some people may respond best to yes or no question. Some people may respond best to open-ended questions is also can be, I believe, a big game changer when it comes to communicating in organizations.
And that's emotional, it's EQ. It's understanding that we're different.
Well, that's self-awareness, right? Also, I mean, self-awareness is at the root of everything. Not only it helps us to understand our strengths and weaknesses, but also how our words, our emotions, the impact that they have on other people.
So I want to summarize today, and if you will take one thing out of this video, is that language is a very, very, very tricky way of communication, and it's surrounded so many aspects, and we need to understand that not necessarily what we understood from the email is necessarily what that person need to convey. If you would remember that, a lot of situation around the organization would look better. Why? Because we will give it some space. We will detach for a minute and ask for clarification, making sure that we got it. So, by the way, you would hear me say it a lot. Just before you're getting upset, state, maybe I don't know. I would ask for a second, just state the title, I don't know, and put some space on it. I have a good friend of mine said that my mind is working really, really fast in my English, because I'm come from Israel, my Hebrew, my brain doesn't translate very quickly as I think the words to English. And he said, you are widely fast, and just take under consideration that your words, when you're translated into English, it's not working that fast. And it was a nice observation for somebody that helped me communicate better, which I never knew. So communication is not math. It's not 1 + 1 necessarily.
Yeah, and one thing I've really learned, that there's no such thing as a stupid question. So if you are in any doubt, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Sometimes you think it's a stupid question, but the way you may ask a person who even wrote you this email, it may actually even make them look in an email in a very different way. And they're like, I haven't even considered that. So by asking a question, you can actually help the person who even sent you that email to improve their inputs, and their information. So never judge yourself, never think you should know better or you're inadequate. Just ask that question.
Understand language is a magic, and not necessarily it's a 1 + 1 is math. So like, subscribe, follow us on Instagram, and until next time, bye.